Someone put in the comments. Who's going to be it's Avram, man. He's the worst person I've ever seen. The worst manager I've ever seen.
No, justice for Avram. No.
You're going to say Glenn Roeder, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm going to say Glenn Roeder.
Yeah, he had a better team.
Had 10 times the team that Avram Grant did.
He had a great
Avram
team.
Grant was bad, do not get me wrong, but you give Avram Grant that 2002-2003 team in 2002-2003, we probably finished 15th, 16th. We don't get relegated.
Wasn't it something with Roeder where he didn't play Di Canio for like a long period of time?
Di Canio had a huge falling out.
Yeah.
And
there was injury problems as well.
Yeah. In later years, it's like, because of how Di Canio's been like as a manager himself, you can possibly understand where they clashed, because Roeder was very incredibly lenient in training. But I think literally, I think in the X and Dave's one, they had the same thing between Roeder and Grant, and I think they end up going with Roeder purely because X had an altercation, or not an incident with Roeder where when he was at Norwich or something, he said that he, as a fans personnel, his role there, said something, and Glenn Roeder just turned around and said, "Well, when you've coached for England, you can give me advice." And it wouldn't surprise me if Glenn Roeder had that bloody attitude was there. But equally, the fact the players found Avram Grant sleeping during training. I mean,
that's the thing. And you knew the stories, man.
Yeah, I jokingly say justice for Avram, but my main issue is that he's terrible. But Roeder was worse because of what he had. We had Jermaine Defoe, Joe Cole, Trevor Sinclair. Yeah, David James, England's number 2, arguably number 1, because David Seaman was well past it by then. You know, the defence wasn't great, but you still had internationals in that defence, or former internationals, who all had, with the exception, I think, of players like Labant, had Premier League experience. You had Steve Lomas, you had Lee Bowyer. You know, that team should never, ever be near a relegation battle. And with Avram Grant, he probably would have teetered us near it, but I guarantee he wouldn't have taken it down. Whereas that 10-11 season, I think Allardyce would have struggled to keep us up, truthfully. That's such a terrible team.
The squad was awful, I do agree. It was really
take away Noble, Parker, Robert Green, Matthew Upson and Tompkins. That's an atrocious team, pretty much.
Just a question about Roeder, because I was about 5 or 6 when he was in charge. But didn't he start to suffer with like health issues, or was that after?
He was. It sounds harsh me saying how much of a terrible manager he was, but yeah, he had because of stress. I think he had a heart attack and a brain hemorrhage.
Yeah, sounds about right.
At the same time, which was horrendous. So everyone sort of forgave him a bit, and then he got fired. Instead of firing him, they just kept him on and then fired him after the first defeat in the Division 1, because Terry Brown wasn't that heartless, just a little bit heartless. But yeah, and it spoke volumes that when Trevor Brookham came in with no managerial experience, suddenly we started winning. Both times. Glenn Roeder was just not a good manager.
Yeah, it is a massive shout, obviously, because I wasn't obviously I was very young when it was the Glenn Roeder side, so it is a bit difficult. But I do distinctively remember the Avram side where he come in from Portsmouth relegated. That Chelsea side he was at, they carried the side itself. It had nothing to do with that Champions League final, in my opinion. And obviously you hear stories, Scott Parker having to do the team talk at half time and how abject he was. And I just thought, maybe you are right. Maybe you have to define this by squads rather, because it is quite close between the two.
Yeah, that 2002-2003 team finished 7th the year before, and with defensive reinforcements should have done better.
Yeah.
Or should have pushed on, really. And Glenn Roeder just took us more than backwards. We were bottom at Christmas. Stayed up a record amount of points eventually, but that team should never have been relegated. Whereas the 10-11 team, again, I'm telling you, Allardyce we would have barely survived under Sam Allardyce, in my opinion, because we were that poor, that not even a thin squad. We just had that much crap.
Yeah,
it was horrendous, that team. So there, for me, I think as bad as Grant as a manager was, ability-wise, Roeder was just a little bit worse.
Dennis has swung me.
Yeah, Dennis has got a way of putting convincing arguments ahead. So, I mean, he got a massive point. Yeah, let's go with Roeder. It does make sense. And to be fair, Grant's side was horrendous. And there's a very, very little, I felt that, even when he did bring in players that we thought were all right, it's Robbie Keane and Bridge, they didn't perform either. So, maybe we've got to give it.
I don't know why. I just found every time Avram Grant did an interview, I just found him hilarious. I don't know why.
It was really winding me up towards the end, mate. It was really starting to get
everything.
Show something, Avram. Show something.
It was a tough game today, and it's like, show some emotion. But I thought maybe he was just doing a poker face with everyone,
No, he had no idea what was going on, man. He had no idea. He was just winging it.
Especially towards the end.
Wasn't he at Chelsea? Wasn't he like? Was he director at Chelsea or
He
some?
was, I think he was their head of recruitment or director of football or something. Because he had because it was a strange one. You remember when we had McLaren as manager and Israel became a really tough team to play. Like they beat Croatia, I think, in the qualifiers, and we laboured to a goalless draw with them, and everyone was like, "Oh, Israel's a small nation, small capture." Only really got Yossi Benayoun and Tel Banheim as players. And I think Abramovich was like, this guy must be a really good manager then, and like wanted to bring him into the fold, and has somehow stolen a career pretty much from then onwards.
I think he's good mates with Abramovich. I think there's something to do in like the background, like their families or something. That's how he got the Chelsea job as well. On top of that, and then we ended up with him.
Surprised me if there was some nepotism there.
It's definitely suspect, 100%.
Yeah, I think someone just backed that up in the chat as well. Said something about Avram knowing Roman.
Yeah.